Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
Do you even know what the hell Mike linebacker is? I was like, well, yeah, but the front confused me a little bit. So sorry, coach. I'll get it right this time. Can you just tell me who you wanted me to make the mic instead of yelling at me and screaming at me the entire drill?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. We picked up in progress Matt Cassel's explanation of one of the sweetest men on the planet, Dante Scarnecchia. See, Dante, as you know, was a talented offensive line coach for the Patriots for many years. He's now a Patriots Hall of Fame inductee, very deserving. He should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And Phil, I think that was in the offing as well as a contributor, assistant coach. Well, Phil, at some point, may play some pickleball with Dante, and that took us down an entirely different path in which we envisioned what Dante would be like on the pickleball court, because he's very sweet and he's very nice, but he's also very explosive.
He is very explosive. I can only imagine Phil doing something like line faults. I would have to think that Dante, he was meticulous with detail, that he would just rip into Phil. That's a line fault. You this, that, and the other, and get after him. I would love to see that. Actually, can we film that and get that little footage of them playing pickleball together, please?
If I end up in the kitchen when I'm not supposed to be in the kitchen,
oh yes,
oh boy, that's not what you're looking for.
What's the kitchen?
It's the little line that you're not allowed to go cross before what? During any time of the game? How's it work, Phil?
No, you just can't hit the ball in the kitchen. I think you can hit and then end up in the kitchen, but you can't make contact with. I'm pretty sure. I have a very rudimentary understanding of what pickleball
Phil,
is.
that's the third time you've been up there in the kitchen, and I'm about to rearrange your pots and pans. I mean, that's the thing I'm not looking for. Now, you were saying that because he is one of the sweetest individuals you've ever met, I've seen him lose his absolute brain on offensive linemen. I mean, what he yelled once at Gronkowski and Hernandez in their first training camp was just bananas, and the whole team had to take a lap. But he turns it on and off.
He does. He's able to turn it on and off, and that's the most amazing part about him is on the field, he is revved up, ready to go. He's the drill sergeant. Nobody gets away with anything, and he'll let you know about it in a very colorful language, to say the least. But as soon as he turns that switch off and puts on his other hat, he goes in like after a game or anything like that, or even after practice at training camp, and he'd go up and he'd see the wives and the families, and you talk about sweet as can be. You know, he's doing a great job. He's doing all the things we're asking, but I'm sitting there going, you literally just dog cussed him. And these offensive linemen were scared. And, you know, Dante's not a big man, right? Not big, but he makes up for it with his personality and also how he interacts, because there was no BS going on when it came to the offensive line or anybody else that was in part of a blocking scheme.
How'd things go for Stephen Neal?
He still has post-traumatic stress syndrome for sure. He wakes up in cold sweats because he's thinking that he's having a nightmare with Dante screaming at him in his ear. It's the best. I used to love watching that too, because Steve would look down at him and Dante's just ripping into him, spit flying everywhere, and this and the other. And I was like, gosh, I would not want to be an offensive lineman.
Light used to get the business too. See, now Matt Light must have been difficult to yell at.
Oh no, but Light brought it upon himself, right? He was the master of the pranks. I mean, he would go in, he switched out Dante Scarnecchia's mouse one time, and it had the shocker on it. So he switched out the mouse, and Dante's in there, and he's got it, and he pushes the mouse, and it's got a shocker. And then he also had that laser pin. He did the same thing. So Light just was one of those guys that always pushed the envelope. So anytime that there was an opportunity to rip into Light, which he made it easy for himself, I mean, Dante would just lose his marbles over Light, because again, Light loved that type of interaction, but Light also thrived in it, right? He knew and he expected it, but at the same time, anything for a laugh.
Dan Copen, did he get the business?
I'm telling you, there's not a guy on the offensive line during my period there that did not get the business from Dante Scarnecchia. And like verbal DDT, boom, throw you in the ground. You're
Phil?
over.
You still playing pickleball, Phil?
Well, We're definitely going to make it happen at some point. I need to figure that out. He's an avid player. I think he plays more than once a week. But I remember hearing something interesting about Dante, and I can't remember who told us this, but it felt like the one person, talk about cussing people out and holding them accountable. It sounds like the one person who in a Bill Belichick meeting, in a team meeting, was essentially exempt from all Bill Belichick rip jobs. So Cassel, he would crush you for whatever, probably,
right.
Innumerable things. The one guy who never got it from Bill, could you back this up, was Scar. Does that sound right to you? Can you ever remember Bill Belichick getting after Dante Scarnecchia the way he might get after another assistant coach or, God forbid, a player?
Not in front of the team. There was such a mutual respect between those two guys. And I could say, honestly, I don't remember a time where he would get into Scar and get after him just because of the mutual respect, like I said. And also, he had been around that building for so long. And I'll say this about Dante Scarnecchia: he was the best offensive line coach I'd ever been around. His attention to detail to get those guys going, get them motivated. And that was part of his reasoning why he'd get after those guys, is because when they needed energy, he brought the energy. And there was a level of intensity that you had to match. And there was an expectation level that he set on a daily basis for each and every guy on that offensive unit, but particularly that offensive line. And he was able to mold those guys and make them better players because he was a technician too. He understood blocking schemes, dual blocks, all those things, and how to get these guys, get the best out of each and every one of those individuals. So, I've never been around a better coach. At the same time, I do not want to be part of his wrath again. So good luck in pickleball.
And you never wanted to be on the end of it. Now, as the game evolves, the blood and guts, neck veins bulging coaches who are going to scream and get a response, they're going to start to fade away because kids don't respond to it. Was it an effective approach with you? Does it work with offensive players? Does it work with quarterbacks? Does it work with, offensive linemen, you get it. They're basically infantry.
Right.
But does it work with different positions?
Well, I think it's a different generation of player. Even when I came in, it was still that old school mentality, grind it out. If you were around a lot of coaches that use those tactics to get the most out of their players, and then the games evolve, the players evolve, the social media aspect, all these different things that come in. I don't say that they're softer. It's just the way in which they approach certain guys now is different, particularly at the skill positions. When you talk about wide receivers, you need to continue to build their confidence. And there's certain guys that you have to understand who you're dealing with too. There's certain guys you could yell at all day long, like Wes Welker. You could yell at him, you could berate him, you could do it all throughout the entire practice. But at the same time, he's going to keep coming back, and that's going to motivate him. Then there was other guys like Randy Moss, who you wouldn't yell at him out on the field. You'd have a personal conversation because it was a respect factor that you'd have to go up and say, hey, bud, I need you a little bit deeper on this route, or I need to do something like that. Even Bill Belichick would go into a meeting prior to the meeting and say, hey, Randy, I'm going to have to get on you in front of the team just to show them that I get on everybody. But that was out of respect so that Randy wasn't caught off guard and go into pissed off Randy, which you didn't want Randy to get pissed off. I'll tell you that. I've been around him where he was mad at me, and it's not a fun situation either. But the old school mentality of coach, it usually does still apply to today's game in certain positions. Offensive line, look, they're used to it. They grind it out each and every day. Defensive line, linebackers, because they've got to have a certain mentality. But then when you deal with skill positions, like I said, a lot of times you're trying to get the most out of them, keep their confidence high. And sometimes that doesn't work by berating them and all that stuff, because they have that capability of snapping back or going into a shell.
Bill, do you got any interesting stories about colorful coaches who tore you a new one?
Ooh, I played for, I feel like, sort of the last generation of hard A coaches in high school. I think I feel like for the most part they're gone now. Like, I don't know, Matt may have more experience, and Tom, you may have more experience with this than I do. My kids haven't reached that age yet, but I had nothing but old school coaches in high school. And you have great stories. It's like Cassel talking about Scar and you getting cussed out, and the guy's a great guy. You've got a great relationship with him. I played for some legends. Jim Cotter at BC High and Jerry Morelli was the basketball coach. Jim Cotter was the BC High football coach for decades upon decades. Norm Walsh, state champion baseball coach. All of these guys were, if you couldn't take hard coaching, you weren't going to last very long. And I feel like that's what's interesting is it feels like New England is one of the last places in the NFL, never mind high school level. It's one of the last places in the NFL where you are going to be coached hard. And if you can't deal with it, I've been told this by people in their front office. If you can't take hard coaching, you're simply not going to garner interest from them, whether you're a draft pick or a free agent or something else. Like, that's a huge piece of what they do. And if you can't accept it, you're going to be, off the board, so to speak. So it's just a really interesting dynamic that they have there that is not like that in other places.
And hard coaching, I mean, you could put in parentheses, screaming profanities at you. I mean, every team is probably getting hard coaching. Right. It's just the level of abuse that accompanies the instruction, I guess.
Well, I think that hard coaching, there's something to it, right? When you're coaching somebody hard and you're
is that how you would define it, though? What I just said?
Well, the conversation is interesting because I think anytime you get personal with a player, that's not hard coaching. You're attacking them as an individual, right? But if you are trying to teach them something and you're coaching them hard, but at the same time saying, this is why you messed up, this is what we need out of you, and then you also are teaching them hard, that's the type of coaching, when you apply hard coaching, that you get results. And it creates a mentally tough player, because what Phil said is true, is in New England, you have to be mentally tough. You have to be able to weather the storm. When it's your turn to get called out and you have to be called out for lack of accountability or messing up on a play, you got to have thick skin, and you become callous to it. But at the same time, if you can't handle that from a mental standpoint and manage that in your own mind, then you see these guys spiral out, and they won't last in that type of system, because it's going to be relentless. Because even when we won games, it was those were the toughest times to come in, because while we were winning by, we won by 14 points or 20 points, we would go into those meetings, we'd get called out for the things that we weren't good at, like for a blocking scheme or a route pattern that we missed or a wide open wide receiver. And then when it was the losses, that was the interesting part of the philosophy, is yes, we got coached hard, but it was less intense than it was when we would actually win the games.
See, here's the interesting thing with the Patriots staff that's really small and has a lot of guys who don't have massive backlogs in coaching. Every player knows that Joe Judge didn't do well with the Giants, and he's never coached quarterbacks before, and he was a special teams and wide receivers coach with the Patriots. And now he's, assisting with the quarterbacks. Everyone knows that Matt was a defensive coach, and that when he was in Detroit, there were times that there were players who said, it's a personal attack on me. He's making me look bad. Or if you have a guy who's a former lacrosse coach, like Mike Pellegrino, coaching the cornerbacks, and he's done a fantastic job with the cornerbacks. Meanwhile, it's funny. Dante can F-bomb you till the cows come home and you're going to nod. And then if somebody else says, you don't know what the bleep you're doing, get your bleep out of your ass, you're embarrassing yourself, you're going to be like, well, maybe I am, but how do you know?
It's true. I mean, but I think with Dante, though, every one of those guys, there's a lot of tough conversations that take place on the field and all that stuff and inside those meeting rooms. But at the end of the day, everybody saw the results, and this is a results-based business. And when he would teach and he would make corrections, and then you go out and you make those corrections on the field, you saw their play elevate. And that's what you want to see as a player. And so while it was difficult, why you don't want to get dog cussed and embarrassed in front of your teammates and called out and all that stuff, well, look, we're all prideful as NFL players. But at the end of the day, when you see the results because of the corrections that he made, and it makes you a better player, and then that shows up on Sunday, that's all you're looking for as a player. So you can deal with the hard coaching throughout the course of the week. But again, if you're getting coached really hard and it's not, the results aren't there, and then that's when you start to question, hey, what are we doing? Why are we doing it?
And that's something the New England Patriots in 2023 will probably have to recapture to an extent. And I think they get the right guys in charge to help do it. in Bill O'Brien, definitely an old school coach, but who will come with the gravitas necessary. But as we look at that, and we've sidetracked quite a bit there for about 15 minutes, I want to bring it back to the schedule, because the Patriots schedule will be announced this week, on Thursday. We already know that one of their home games is actually an away game. They're going to play the Indianapolis Colts in Germany, the Patriots giving up a home game to further the brand. But I want to ask you guys in this schedule look ahead, which as a player, Matt, and then I'm sure Phil's got questions too, but what as a player is the first thing you look for when you examine a schedule?
Well, it's always interesting because as a player, obviously, your main focus is always the division, right? The divisional race, because that's going to get you in the playoffs if you win your division. But at the end of the day, when you already know what your division is, and then you're sitting there going, okay, who are my opponents? And again, you get excited when the schedule comes out, because again, this is going to be your competition for the year. And you get excited for those games, like the Kansas City Chiefs, right?
So are you looking for prime time? Are you looking for off-time games?
Hold on. How is it not the bye week? Don't you want the bye week? Isn't that what you care about? You're going to make your vacation. You want to know where you're going golfing. You want to know when you're hitting Cancun. Like young Matt Cassel, I know.
Young Matt Cassel.
I know young Matt Cassel had his nose.
Oh, is it early?
Where's that bye?
Early? Is it late? Where's the bye? Yeah, I mean, it's definitely Thursday night game, right? Thursday night game is always a grinder that you've got to get mentally prepared for starting the off season, right? Your primetime games, there's no doubt about it. Bye is a big part. Where does it come in the season? Does it come early? Does it come late? When we used to get one bye week, I remember I was in Kansas City, we got the bye week after week 3 and then had to grind it out the rest of the year. You know what I mean? So it's bye week is important, but not as important as your opponents for the year, because you're looking at it in its entirety and saying, this is a pretty solid strength of schedule in terms of who the New England Patriots are going to play, particularly because the division is so competitive. But at the same time, when you look at it, they're playing 7 playoff teams from last season, and that's going to be a daunting task for this team to go out and, go get back to where they want to be.
Phil, what do you look for?
I look for the this is so cliched sports media guy. I'm looking for the gauntlet.
Yes,
the gauntlet. It's that stretch of 4 or 5 games that are gonna, you think at least are gonna make or break a season. So it's usually based on quarterbacks, but sometimes it's not. But it's that, it doesn't always have to be in succession, right, Tom? Sometimes it's like 4 out of 5 games, but there's no bye week in there, and it's like if you can get out of there with 2 or 3 wins,
you might get like a Thursday night game and travel involved.
Right.
Then you
get back from Frankfurt, and you got Aaron Rodgers, and then you got Josh Allen, and then you've got Patrick Mahomes, like at the, to finish up your, like, that's the sort of thing I'm looking for.
It's funny too, because the longer you examine the schedule from a sports writer's perspective, you can find a million places they're getting hosed. Oh, look at this. This team came off a bye the week before and didn't travel, and they're loaded up. And these guys just had to play Pittsburgh on the road. Huh. Goodell. Friggin' Goodell. Hey, the NBA playoffs are here, and you can turn crossovers into cash with FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/NSBO right now. Place a $5 bet, and you'll get an instant $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. This is what's great about betting on FanDuel. Great promotions like this every day. You got a safe and secure app. You get paid instantly, and you can get down on your favorite bets every single day you see something. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Go to FanDuel.com/NSBO and sign up to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet your first $5. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Hope is here. GamblingHelplineMA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support, Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 New York. 21 plus in present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, or Virginia. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit www.mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming or visit www.1800gambler.net in West Virginia.
I want to do an exercise because it's interesting when you look at the number of quarterbacks. Let's roll through just the opponents right now. Obviously, in the division, you got Bills and Josh Allen, Jets and Aaron Rodgers, Miami Dolphins and Tua. Health providing with all three, mostly with Tua. After that, you have quarterbacks who could be really good some days. Denver and Russell Wilson, that's on the road. Daniel Jones and the Giants, that's on the road. Jimmy G and the Raiders, that's on the road. I'm not going to say the Colts and Steelers have good quarterbacks at the moment.
Dak Prescott.
Oh, yeah, Daiquiri.
Yep.
That's on the road. Dallas is on the road.
I believe Dallas is on the road as well.
Yeah, you're right. It is. I missed it. So Dak actually would fit perfectly into that. He's either, he could be really good to excellent to, yeah, I don't get it with him. So rank those road quarterbacks that the Patriots have to deal with, fellas.
I'll go first.
Well,
I'll go
go
first.
ahead.
I'm going to go Allen, Rodgers, Prescott, Garoppolo, Tagovailoa. Still haven't gotten to Russell Wilson. That's where I'll get to Russell Wilson and Kenny Pickett, and then bringing up the rear, Danny Dimes and all his money.
Danny Dimes. He's got more than dimes now.
Wait, who's Indianapolis? You got to do Indianapolis too.
This is road quarterbacks. Indy's at home, I thought.
Indy's in Germany.
Oh, the Frankfurt game. Sorry. Frankfurt. Okay. I'll put Anthony Richardson as a rookie behind Danny Dimes. He's going to be better.
You
than
got Danny Dimes is behind Pickett?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Danny Dimes.
Okay,
Really?
Matt. Give me your away quarterbacks.
Okay, I like Allen at number 1, Rodgers at number 2. 3, I'm going to go with Dak Prescott at number 3. Okay, at number 4, I'm going to go with Tua Tagovailoa because I think just with his supporting cast, when he's on, he's on. Okay, 5, I'm going to go with
Danny Dimes.
No, I'm not going to go him yet. I'm going to go with, I think Russell Wilson's going to be a lot better this year, just based on the fact that the head coaching situation's a little bit better this year. Jimmy G, Danny Dimes. Then I'm going to go Pickett, and then I'm going to go Indy, Anthony Richardson.
All right. Where would Jalen Hurts? Okay, let's go with the home opponents.
Mm-hmm.
You got stack those, will you?
All right. I gotta actually look at the home opponents.
All right.
Are we giving Matthew Cassel? Is Sam Howell the starting quarterback for the Commanders?
Yes, he will be.
Okay. We don't have to do all the teams we've already done. We're going to mesh them together. We have Sam Howell, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Jameis. Phil?
No, Derek Carr, baby.
Derek Carr.
For God's sake.
Derek Carr. D. Carr, babe.
Freaking Jameis. That's 5, except for Howell. Good quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the more difficult group? Is it on the road or at home?
It's at home because you didn't even mention Rodgers or Allen.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
That's a tough slate. But
at least they got them at home.
That's a tough slate. I mean, yeah, but at the same time, I mean, you're talking about the premier quarterbacks. I mean, Patrick Mahomes right there, Josh Allen. You got Aaron Rodgers is going to be an absolute stud. Tua is still in the mix there. I mean, you've just got
Jalen Hurts,
Herbert with a first-round pick at
Jalen,
receiver.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts, is up there. You've got Justin and Herbert. I mean,
how many top 10 quarterbacks are they seeing? One, Bills, Cowboys. Dak has to be a top 10.
Yeah.
Bills, Cowboys, Jets,
Chargers,
Bills, Chargers, Chiefs, Eagles. Oh, I don't know about whether we're going to include Derek Carr, but should we include him?
No,
but he's
okay.
He's close. He's close to cracking the top 10 for sure.
So 8, they are playing 8 of the top 10 in their 17 games. They will face top 10 quarterbacks 8 times.
Yep.
Loaded.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it, baby.
Loaded.
Tom, hopefully we're done with the scheduling stuff because I want to ask Cassel something that is draft related, but it's not specific to this past draft. But now that we're at a time where NFL teams are welcoming their rookies to their facilities, where a lot of veterans, they don't have to be there, but a lot of veterans are at the facilities as well. I'm always interested by the interplay between a young buck who's just been drafted, maybe early in the draft, and shows up, and the veteran is there who plays the same position, and he knows that kid is there essentially to take his job, and what that interaction is like. So did you ever have to deal with that? I'm sure you did to some degree. When a young quarterback showed up, how did you treat him? Did you give him the cold shoulder? Did you dump X-Lax in his protein shake after practice? Like what was that whole relationship like when the new rookies show up and you've got to deal with them?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because as a veteran quarterback, I'll go back to Minnesota, and I was in Minnesota. This was my second season. I just had re-signed there, and I knew that there was potential that we were going to take a quarterback. But again, I'm watching the draft to see who we're going to take in the first round. They picked Teddy Bridgewater, right? And immediately, you get the red flag go up and go, oh gosh, here we go. What the, you're cussing a little bit. You're going, but at the same time, I've always taken the approach that I treat everybody with respect because again, you're going to be in that room. Now, does that take away from your competitiveness? Not at all. You want to go win every competition out on the field when you get your reps and do all that stuff. But when he comes in the building, look, I'm going to introduce myself and I'm going to, be the veteran guy that I've always been. And at the same time, tell them, hey, anything you need, let me know. And you start to build that relationship because again, you spend a ton of time throughout the course of a year in that meeting room. And you want to have a good, solid room because that helps you and helps you get better each and every day. But at the same time, in the back of your mind, every time you're at practice, you're like, hey, I've got to show up each and every day. And that's what it creates though. That competitiveness that we talk about in the league is when you have somebody pushing you from behind, right? And you have somebody come in that is there to take your job, then are you going to rise to the occasion? And I'll tell you that, like that preseason probably was one of my best preseasons leading up into the season just because of that reason. I knew that I had to have such great attention to detail. I had to go out and execute every single time. And so that's one thing that I'll say about it is it pushes you. But again, at the draft, when you're sitting there at home, maybe with a drink or something like that, you're not feeling too happy about it, but you start to settle in, you absorb it a little bit, and then you say, okay, this is what it is. And now we got to go to work.
Does the GM call you? Did Rick Spielman reach out to you, or did they reach out soon after the draft and say, this is what we did, this is why we did it, hope you understand, and deal with it?
Yeah, you know what? North Turner reached out to me and said, hey, look, we did take Teddy in the draft. I don't want you to think that this changes anything for you. You're still our guy. You got to go out there and you've got to earn it. But at the same time, we liked where we got him in the draft and he'll come in and he'll compete with you. But they reach out, especially at the quarterback position, right? Because they don't want to leave you in the dark and just be like, oh, nothing happened in the draft. Hopefully you didn't see it. Instead they call you, and as like a grown man, you got to sit there and you got to say, even if you don't like it, you might be thinking in the back of your mind, what the heck is going on here? But he reached out and just let me know, hey, well, you're still our guy going into camp. You've got to go earn it just like everybody else here. But we're bringing in Teddy, and that doesn't change the dynamics of anything for you moving forward. So I always appreciated it when that happened.
What was it like when you came in as a 7th round pick here in 2005 to a team that had just won a Super Bowl with a guy who was like 27 and already had 3 rings, and you hadn't played since high school.
Right. I hadn't played since high school. And then I do remember walking into the locker room for the first time, and I called him Mr. Brady. I was like, well, that was such a weak move by you, Cassel. I mean, looking back on it, I was like, did I really call him Mr. Brady? I mean, what a loser. But nonetheless, then we go into our first meeting and they put up the depth chart. And they put up the depth chart. It's Brady, it's Rohan Davey, it's Doug Flutie, it's Chris Redmond, and there's Matt Cassel's name at the very bottom. And I was like, okay, got some work to do, because we had 5 quarterbacks. All those guys were veterans. I mean, Doug Flutie was 42 at the time, or 41 at the time, driving his Trans Am with the big eagle on the front into practice. I was like, this guy's been around for a while. So, it's a different dynamic when you come in. But at the same time, I felt so blessed and lucky to be able to, one, get drafted, because you guys know my story. I never played it down in college. Yep. And then so it's one thing to be happy that you're drafted and that you actually are in the building, but it's a whole nother thing to go out there. And when you do get your opportunities, because they are limited, when you have 5 guys, you've got to go out, and every opportunity you got to take advantage of it. Because if that's what happened, unfortunately, with Chris Redmond, when we were in OTAs and stuff like that, he was having some trouble at times getting in and out of the huddle because we had a lot of verbiage. And I was like, and that's one thing that I had to study my butt off on, because they believed in calling the plays at practice. So then to the quarterback, so you had to get in and get into the routine of being able to go and verbalize it when you got into the huddle. And so that was something that I really had to study and work hard on, but it's about earning it.
So you mean they would say the play to you
right outside of the huddle?
And then you'd have to walk and keep it in your head and burp it out.
Yeah, so it would be, I'll give you a great example. Z shift is 0 out slot, alert zing, jab 130, cross X go, alert samurai. And then we'd have a double cadence. We call it molasses. And I'd say mo, ready, break. But you'd have to, that's something that's just ingrained in my head at this point. But
somebody said that to you on the side.
Somebody said that, right? Josh McDaniels would say that, and I'd have to go get in the huddle and go. And so a lot of times, sometimes you can't. You're like your mind's working, you're processing, and check. Tell me again what the heck you just called, And so, but they would get pissed off when you wouldn't, because that was the most important part of being part of an effective offense, is getting in and out of the huddle with enough time to operate at the line of scrimmage, especially with the motions and the checks and all the stuff that we had going.
Isn't that fascinating, Phil?
I love it. I love hearing about all of the detail that they expect from new players, because to me, it's such a great way for them to weed out people who aren't gonna fit. It's all about, again, we're coming fresh off the draft. I spent so much time on it. Like, it's still sort of where my mind is geared, but it feels like most of the work done, even after you bring guys into the building, when you're trying to get down to your 53, it's about process of elimination. So it's like, okay, yep, the world thinks these 200 guys are draftable. We're going to look at 100 of them, and within 5 minutes, we're going to tell you why they won't fit in New England, and they're not part of our process, and then they whittle it down from there.
It's funny.
And so that continues though into camp, I think, Tom, based on all the stuff that they throw at these guys. Juju Smith-Schuster talking about making his flashcards so that he can keep up with the offense when they actually have to show up to work. I'm not saying he's not going to make the team. He's going to be part of this team, but there are a lot of guys that probably can't keep up with that stuff. And if you can't, you're not going to be around very long.
And they are probably eliminating left and right. You look at, Bryce Young, 98 on that S2 thing, could play for any team in the league. Was Will Levis there? Was CJ Stroud there? I mean, are those players who are sitting there on the board, the Patriots, like, he's awesome, but I don't know if he can get us in and out of the huddle. And we love his skill set, but the way we do things is different. So do we morph the way we do things to fit him because he's so outstanding? Or do we give him the time to do it? Or do we just say, move on down the road?
Well, what's interesting now too, Matt, is like, especially when you talk about the draft, right? How many teams even huddle anymore? Like, how many teams actually have a play call that comes into the quarterback and he relays something to his teammates? I know even for receivers, I talked to coaches this year who are scouting high-end, high-quality receivers in this year's draft who were not used to getting plays in a huddle. They were used to
Right.
looking to the sideline and learning about their responsibility by looking to the sideline. They try to, I guess, part of these visits, I don't know how many visits you went on. That would be another good conversation to have with you. But these pre-draft visits, you can have a receiver into a visit and you can put him through somewhat of a walkthrough situation out on the field, read a play to him, see if he can pick it up, see what he can do, see if he can get himself aligned. And I think, Matt, for some of these guys, it's like advanced calculus because they just never done it before. And if you're the Patriots, you're like, well, we can't work with that. Then all of a sudden there might be a first-round receiver that you're not even considering,
Right.
because he can't do some of these things that he's going to have to know how to do basically on day one.
Right. And I think that's part of the evaluation process, because I had some of those coaches come out and we did visits at USC with the Raiders, with the Chargers, with the Bengals. And part of it was going in and getting on the whiteboard before we'd go out to even throw. And we get on the whiteboard, or we'd watch film and he'd say, call out this play. What was the thought process here? What was the pass pattern? What was your read? And you'd have to go through from the time you broke the huddle to going out and say, hey, describe me this defense. Is it an over front? Is it an under front? Is it a 3-4? How does that change your protection schemes? Are you dueling front side? All the different components that go into playing the quarterback position. So we'd watch film. Then he'd tell me a few plays that he'd have me draw up on the board that they might run, and what my thoughts were on this. Is it something that I was familiar with? And then from there we'd go out throw. But then when we come back in, a lot of times they'd say, hey, could you draw up that play that we went through before we went out to throw? And this could be, an hour and a half, 2 hours after the fact. And we'd go in and you'd have to be able to continue to process and use your memorization of what the key points were in the teaching tools that he used about how they run the route, why they run it, maybe an adjustment. Where's your side adjust? Where's your hot? Where would be your issues? And so it was very intense in those meetings. To a certain degree, it was much more lax when you're one-on-one, but at the same time for you mentally, it was intense, because you know that you're setting a standard for yourself and you're going to make an impression on this coach and this organization based on whether or not you're able to go and do really well. But there's also components now for a lot of these quarterbacks and stuff like that, these draft meetings and stuff, they go out and they have coaches that go and help them with that processing too. So they can kill some of these tests because they've been in school basically and getting schooled up on how to go through these interview processes. So it might be a little different for some of these guys nowadays.
Hey, your boy Jordan Palmer is one of the best of the best when it comes to that sort of stuff, I think, now, in terms of the pre-draft stuff. So I know Scarnecchia would do this. Speaking of Scarnecchia, you do the same thing with offensive linemen. He told me on a podcast that I just did with him.
Right.
He would not feel comfortable, Tom, with the Patriots drafting a lineman that he had not yet met with, because he wanted to. Every lineman that they took in the draft, he wanted to understand that they would be able to understand everything that was going to be thrown their way. Smart, tough, athletic enough. Those are the three things you needed. And smart was number one. So if he goes and he meets with you, he would give you everybody the same test. He says it would always be about empty protections. And so all the different scenarios you could throw at a lineman out of empty. And he would do the same thing that Matt's talking about with the coaches would do for quarterbacks. He'd talk about a play. He'd talk about a protection. He'd talk about verbiage that the Patriots would use, that he'd be using. And then he'd erase it off the board. He'd flip the board around, whatever it was. And he'd ask them to drop the same thing and be able to spit it back to him. And if they couldn't do it, even if they were regarded as great players, Scar would go back to him and say, hey, guys, I know you thought that this guy might be draftable for us. That's why you had me visit him, but he's not going to be able to get it here. And they wouldn't take him.
That's why it's interesting. He was the only one to visit Nate Solder prior to the draft. They didn't have Nate Solder in for a visit. He took him 17th overall. The only contact he had was a visit with Dante Scarnecchia. You nodded knowingly during that a little bit, Matt. What was that for?
Oh, empty protection is a whole another animal in itself, just with all the different changes at the line of scrimmage, with the front variation, and also where you're turning your protection, especially for the quarterback position, and also the offensive lineman, because it's a 5-man protection. And so when it's 3-4, you can do a double duel. You can slide the line all the way out to take care of a Mike Sam. You can do so many different things at the line of scrimmage, and those guys have to be keyed in to these code words that we would use to set the protection. And so it's always the most challenging in terms of understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it, and also where your issues are, not just for the offensive line, but particularly for the quarterback, because that's why I was nodding my head. I remember going through that process of going, hold on, not block the defensive end because he starts to stand up and they're overloading me here and slide everybody out. And that's Terrier Tally is what we used to use. I was like, okay, I'm probably just going to throw hot. Just going to throw hot here.
There's even, and for the Patriots and for Dante, like obviously you've been doing it for a long time, right, Matt? So like you add these things onto what they were doing. And I bet this is not something he would necessarily ask a rookie draft pick, but like he had something called the Matt Light rule. Do you remember this? Where like Matt, it was talking about, I think, about dual protections, and Matt would complain about not being able to see the mic sometimes from his spot at left tackle. And so there would be something that would happen on his side of the line where the center would actually almost like swing around and pull. I think this was part of the Matt Light rule and would help pop off the tackle.
Right.
And they called that the Matt Light rule. There's a David Andrews rule, I guess, which I don't know the details for that. There's a rule for a lot of these guys because the player would go to Scar and say, hey, Scar, I know the rule is this, but like, I can't do that for reasons X, Y, and Z. And then you have something added into the playbook because of that.
Phil, you started to say it. I just want to make this observation that's related to what the team is going through now. You made the observation of adding and adding and adding. And that was something that really, as you know, Matt, the playbook by 2019 was Tom Brady's. You know, we could say it had the Earhart Perkins origins.
Right.
And that Charlie Weiss ran it, and then Josh ran it, and that Bill O'Brien was involved, but it was all in Brady's head, and it had grown and grown and grown and grown and grown that you're now putting down the friggin' Dead Sea Scrolls in front of these players and saying you're going to have to learn this. So you look back and you can see the logic of, okay, Dante's not here and we can't coach it like that. Tom's not here and no one really understands that. Josh just left. I guess I can see the logic. Is that a good analysis, do you think, Matt, as a theory as to why they wanted to do what they did last year?
Well, it's interesting because when I got there, right, that you said it earlier in the pod, they just came off their third Super Bowl championship. So anybody that's coming into that building, there's success, right? And you have to get caught up to speed. And they're going to continue to expand because your quarterback and his abilities is particularly mentally. I mean, he was so sharp. Tom was so sharp at the line of scrimmage and understanding defense and doing all that stuff that I was in awe when I first got there. I was like, how does this guy process so quickly and get all that? But it's a much different animal when you have a rookie quarterback his first year. But I think Mac Jones can handle it. Obviously, he showed that and has proven that he can process, and he's a really smart individual as well. But it's also understanding who you're dealing with, right? Because there's growth that takes place from one year to the next year. The more defenses that you see, also as you just get more experience, you get more comfortable. Now, this will be a different offensive scheme than what they ran last year, but it's also probably very similar verbiage to what they used last year, I would hope, because that'll help with his learning curve. But then you have to tailor it to the players and what can they do really well. And so that's part of the process of this offseason with Bill O'Brien, is watching that film, saying he throws these routes really well. We need to, somehow find a way to get him in more of a rhythm with these type of routes, whether it's quick game, whether it's down the field throws, maybe it's a post route or something like that, and incorporate those to make him as comfortable as possible, because confidence breeds success at the quarterback position and also amongst the offensive unit as in general. So they're just going to need, sorry.
That's okay. I'm just wondering. So you're saying they're probably not going to just jump back to what they were doing in 2021 or revert to what O'Brien ran here previously or what he did in Houston or Alabama. You can't keep switching shit.
Well, you can always manipulate stuff. I mean, you go back to Bill O'Brien, and I think we've had this conversation before about the adjustments that he made when Deshaun Watson got there, and the zone read and the RPOs. I mean, all that stuff he incorporated in the offense to fit him. So again, what he did is he took a player's skill set and said, this guy does this really well. We watched the college film and he incorporated that into the offense. He's going to have to do the same stuff when he gets here. Now you're going to run your offense with the terminology, and everybody's going to have to get caught up to speed on the terminology and what they use. And at the same time, make those subtle adjustments as you go forward. But again, we talk about it too with New England. It's a game plan from one game plan type offense from 1 week to the next. Your game plan changes dramatically based on your opponent, based on what they do, and also the structure of what they run in their fronts.
Billy, we got all over the place. We did mean coaches. We did schedules. We did how's it feel when you come into a thing? And we talked about offensive changes come into a thing. Anyway, so I think we're done. Phil, do you have a pod coming up yourself?
We do. We have one coming out with Mike Lombardi, former Patriots executive. We're talking about the drafts, best player available. We're talking about grades, the grading system, why you might pass on a position of need, quote unquote need, because you can't draft a backup just because it's a need. If there's a player that you think is a starter staring you in the face, just doesn't make sense. So,
Right.
So we're going to be doing all that. I have started to look up futures bets that I'm going to talk with our guy Matthew about later. NFL futures bets.
All right.
NFL futures bets.
Okay, I have a thing I got to do in a second for our sponsor FanDuel too, so you're going to hear that. For Matthew, for Phil, I'm Tom Curran. We'll talk to you next week. Schedule coming out tomorrow. Hold on to your hats.